Hello everybody and welcome to Books with Ike. My name is Isaac and today I'm going to be going over the best books I read in 2020. Now 2020 was a pretty great reading year for me. I read a lot of amazing books and so I've got 14 books/series on this list. And I've put them into a rough order, but it's not like a proper ranking. This is just how I feel at the moment. It could change. And so if you see something that I've rated higher than something else, but it's lower on the list, ignore that, because my star ratings really aren't a factor in this. I mean, all of these are books I've rated 4.5 or 5 stars, but not everything that I rated 4.5 or 5 stars made it onto this list. And so yeah, without further ado, I'm just gonna get on into it. And I want to start with 2 honourable mentions, and the first of those is Red, White and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. Now, I originally gave this book 5 stars, and I loved it, and I thought it was amazing, but over time it hasn't stuck in my feelings as much as the rest of these books have, so that's why it's not actually on the list. I do have some problems with it. I think the portrayal of Alex and Henry's relationship is a bit stereotypical, without reason to be, and so, yeah, I'm not as into this as I was when I first read it. But it's still a great book, and I do highly recommend it. This is an adult romance about the son of the President of the United States falling in love with the Prince of Wales. And the other honourable mention I have is The Fell of Dark by Caleb Roehrig. And this is YA urban fantasy set in the town of Fulton Heights, which is not a safe place to be because of its high population of vampires. And so the main character, August, is growing up in Fulton Heights, and he just wants to get away so he doesn't have to worry about being attacked by a vampire ever in his life again. But weird things are happening to August. He's being stalked by vampires, he's developing strange abilities, and he's drawing pictures that he doesn't remember drawing. And then August meets a vampire who gives him a cryptic warning about the end of the world. And so this book is just pure fun. If you've been craving a gay vampire story for as long as I have, pick this up because it is exactly what you want and exactly what you deserve. Plot is really fast-paced, the characters are great, the romance is really steamy and sensual, but at the same time there's a lot of sinister vampire stuff about it, and there's also some polyamory rep, so if you're looking for that, definitely pick this one up. This is just exactly what I wanted, and I love it for that. And so, the first book that's actually on my list is Magic's Pawn by Mercedes Lackey, the first book in the Valdemar the Last Herald Mage trilogy. And I did read the rest of the trilogy this year, and unfortunately the other 2 books do not make it onto this list. But this is basically the first thing that ever comes up if you ever look up gay fantasy, or at least it was back when I was a teenager first looking for gay fantasies. And so this is about a boy called Vaniel, who is the son of a lord, who is kicked out of his house for failing to live up to his father's standards of masculinity, and sent to stay with his Aunt Seville, who his father hopes will be able to straighten him out. And when I say straighten him out, you know what I mean. So this book is just great. I love the characters, I love the world building, I love the plot, and it's really fast-paced and has so many twists and turns and you can't ever see where it's going. But the main reason this is on the list is because it is so gay. This is not a fantasy story with a gay main character. This is a story about a gay main character coming to terms with their sexuality, which uses fantasy as a backdrop. And the way it handles it is really good. There are so many classic queer tropes in this story, and the climax is that at its peak, and it's just so great. I love Vaniel as a character. He's just so vulnerable and confused and desperate for his family's approval, and he's just adorable. And so, yeah, I absolutely loved this book, and I highly recommend it. And I do think it's worth finishing the trilogy, because both of the other books are good, but then just not on this level. And the next book I have is Assassin's Apprentice by Robin Hobb, the first book in the Farseer trilogy, and the first book in the Realm of the Elderlings series. And so, this is about a boy who is the bastard son of a prince, and eventually his peasant family get tired of raising him, and they bring him to the royal castle for the prince to look after. But instead, the prince abdicates the throne and leaves. And so the boy is given into the care of the prince's stable master called Burek, and eventually the king decides to make use of him by training him as an assassin. And so this is an intensely character-driven story following the boy from the time that he is 5 years old until I think he's about 14 or 15 at the end of this book. And it is just one of the most relentlessly depressing, tragic stories that you will ever read. I forgot to mention it at the beginning, but I'm gonna leave a list of, content warnings for all of these books in the description, so if you have any triggers, check those out. But the story of this book is just great. All of the characters are so incredibly well written and well realised. It just baffles me how, even down to the most minor characters, they're all really interesting. Except Molly. Hate me if you want, I don't care about Molly. And the world building is fantastic. And while there isn't so much there in terms of plot, what is there is really interesting, and I can't wait to see where it goes. I'm gonna read the last 2 books this year, hopefully, and so I'm hoping it will just make me love the main character even more, and I'm sure that it will. I also have City of Betrayal by Claudie Arsenault, or possibly Arsenault, I'm not sure which it is. This is the second book in the City of Spires series, and it's set in this free city of Isandor, which is one of the few free cities standing against the tyrannical Myrian Empire. And so the first book follows an idealistic lord called Diel Dathiri, who wants to use his political power to expel the Myrian enclave from the city. Meanwhile, Lord Arathiel Braston returns to Isandor after a century of being trapped in a place where time doesn't flow. And so, not knowing if his family still exists, or if they will accept him if they do, he takes shelter in the slums. And so this series has a full LGBT+ cast, and when I mean LGBT+, I mean LGBT+. There are lesbian, gay, bisexual and transgender characters, but there are also non-binary characters, and aromantic asexual characters, and romantic asexual characters, and the author herself is an aromantic asexual, I do believe, and so its own voices for that. And this book is heavily focused on themes of sexuality, gender, race, and class, and it masterfully works these issues into the narrative, and it also has one of the most adorable found family dynamics of all time. And I love all of the main characters in this series, and trust me, there are a lot of main characters, and I especially love Arathiel, he's such an interesting character, and it also has this really interesting and complex political plot, and it also has some pretty great world building. So yeah, it has incredible characters, an incredible plot, and incredibly well handled themes. And it also has some really adorable romance, and this book builds up one which is just so cute. So yeah, all around a great series and a great book. Next I have Stalking Darkness by Lynn Llewellyn, the second book in the Night Runner series. And the first book, Luck in the Shadows, is about a boy called Alec of Kerry who is arrested for poaching, and he helps his fellow inmate Seragil to perform a jailbreak, and Seragil sees potential in him and takes him on as a travelling companion, and eventually as an apprentice, because Seragil is part of a secret spy network, and he thinks that Alec has what it takes to join them. And so I liked Luck in the Shadows, but I had some quite significant problems with it. But this book was incredible. The atmosphere in the writing is just so well done. It is just so consistently creepy and foreboding. There's some great world building in here. The characters are incredible, and the romantic development between Alec and Seragil is adorable. It has an incredible depiction of war and the horrors of war, and the espionage and spy stuff is really fun, and there are some really emotional moments, some really intense moments. It's just all around great, and I loved it. Next I have Seasons of War by Derek Landy, the latest book in the Skullduggery Pleasant series. And Skullduggery Pleasant is a middle grade urban fantasy about a 12-year-old Irish girl called Stephanie Edgley, who becomes the apprentice of a magical detective who just so happens to be a reanimated skeleton. And so this is the latest Skullduggery Pleasant book, and it is insane. So much happens in this book I couldn't even accurately summarise it if I wanted to, but just, I thought I knew where this series was going. But this book wrapped up all of the plot threads that I thought were going to be important for the rest of the series, so I have no idea where it's going from here. And I love that. And I love how it handles Valkyrie's mental health, and I love the character development for certain characters, and the revelations that happen in this book are also insane. And so, yeah, it was just incredible. And you know what the best thing about that is? This is nowhere near my favourite Skullduggery Pleasant book. So yeah, just read Skullduggery Pleasant, please, because it is all incredible. And yeah, I can't wait to see where the series goes from here. I also have Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Elias Sainz. And this book is just beautiful. This is about a boy called Aristotle who has no friends and then befriends someone called Dante. And Ari's dad was in the Vietnam War and never talks about it. And Ari also has a brother who is in prison for a reason that Ari doesn't know. And so that's basically all I can say about the plot. But this book is stunning. The writing style has this like lazy, dreamlike quality to it, which really enhances the story. And Ari and Dante's relationship is just so wholesome and sweet and adorable. And the way that this book handles its themes is incredible. Ari is just a beautiful portrayal of repressed queerness, and the way that it is worked into the story is so, like, incredibly subtle, but also incredibly obvious at the same time. And it's also this really interesting meditation on secrets and how keeping secrets and bottling up your emotions can damage you. And it's just such an incredibly poignant and meaningful book, and I love it. Next I have Teeth by Hannah Moskowitz. And so this is a sort of fabulous story about this boy called Rudy whose younger brother has cystic fibrosis, and as a last-ditch effort to save him, his entire family moves to this remote island which has magic fish which are said to cure any illness and dramatically increase people's lifespans. And on that island, Rudy meets a girl called Diana, and also a boy who is part fish. And so, this is probably the most disturbing book I've ever read, and so I don't really recommend it to people, but I loved it. The writing style is just so incredibly atmospheric, and at the same time it's very raw and emotional. The relationship between Rudy and Teeth is one of the most interesting I've ever read. It's so tumultuous, and they're at times really sweet together, and at times it's just so toxic and they're so bad for each other, and it's just so fascinating. And Rudy and Teeth are individually also such fascinating characters. Rudy's anger and resentment at his situation is so understandable, and so when he hates himself for it, it's just so upsetting, because none of this is his fault, and he deserves to feel what he does. And the way this book handles its themes of like responsibility versus freedom and family ties and what family means is just so well done. It's just an incredibly poignant and devastating and emotional, but at the same time very hopeful, bittersweet book. It's just so good. Next I have Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. And this is a YA urban fantasy about a trans boy called Yadriel, who is part of a community of brewhexes. And they have a very gendered magic system where women can heal, but men can summon spirits and release them to the afterlife. And so because he's trans, Yadriel has been prevented from taking the ceremony that will give him his powers, so he performs it himself in secret. And he is determined to prove himself to his family as a real brujo, and therefore, by extension, as a boy. And so he wants to summon the ghost of his recently killed cousin to find out what happened to him, but instead he accidentally ends up summoning the ghost of a boy from his school called Julian, and things progress from there. And so this book is just so adorable. There's no other word for it. It's just so cute and fun. Yadriel and Julian are such great characters, and their relationship is just one of the cutest things you will ever read. And the world building is so interesting and so well written, and you can really tell that Aidan Thomas loves their culture in the way that it's written. And it also tackles so many important topics, like the intersection of classism and racism in schools, schools, and the stigmatization of ADHD, and the importance of found family and what it means to queer people especially, and also, you know, police racism, is just great in just about every aspect. The plot is really predictable, I will say that, but that really doesn't matter to me. It's just so good. Next I have The Tower of Nero by Rick Riordan, the fifth and final book in the Trials of Apollo series, and currently the final book in the Percy Jackson universe. This was just so incredible. The Trials of Apollo is basically a deconstruction of the previous Rick Riordan books, and this book brings that to its ultimate conclusion. The way this series handles abuse and trauma is just so well done. It's just amazing. And the new mythological elements that were introduced in this book were fascinating, and I loved the plot itself. It was the right level of fun and dramatic, with some nice twists, and a lot of real emotion behind it. And I love the character development for Apollo, and I loved that we got to see Nico and Will in such a prominent role. And this was just the perfect finale for the Trials of Apollo, and for the Percy Jackson universe. Except it's not the finale for the Percy Jackson universe, because there is clearly set up for more books in the series, so looking forward to those. But yeah, this was just an incredible book overall. And I forgot to give a synopsis for this. This is about the god Apollo, who is stripped of his powers and banished to Earth by Zeus after the events of the Heroes of Olympus series, and has to prove himself worthy of becoming a god again. Next I have Red Skies Falling by Alex London, the second book in the Skybound trilogy. And this is a YA high fantasy set in a world where everything revolves around birds of prey, and falconry is the main way of life. So everything to do with religion, sports, society, class, everything revolves around birds, and it's really well built, this. And the first book follows a pair of twins called Bryson and Kylie, who have to go into the mountains and capture a ghost eagle, which is the most important, deadly, and feared bird of prey in existence. And Bryson wants to be a great falconer but has no real ability, whereas Kylie has the magical ability to control birds, but wants nothing to do with falconry. And meanwhile, an army of religious fanatics called the Kartami are marching on the twins' home, intent on wiping out the falconers and the birds that dare obey them. So I liked the first book, but this book was incredible. The plot is so twisty and unpredictable that you have no idea where it's going at all times. It's great. The character development was incredible. The romantic development for Bryson and his love interest was adorable. The development to the magic system is so interesting, and it turns everything we thought we knew on its head. And the writing itself is just great, and Alex London manages to weave in all of these bird metaphors and references and similes into the writing, and it's so good. And having read the third book, the setup for the thematic resolution of the series is pretty well done in here as well. But yeah, it was an all-around incredible book. I can't think of many flaws, other than there was, like, some parts of the writing style that I didn't like, which was when Alex London, in the middle of intense scenes, would write out people screaming, or birds screaming, so it would say, "Ah!" or "Ree!" No, it took me right out of it. But other than that, it was really good. I also have War Child by Karin Lauachi, or Loachi, or Lauache, or Loache. I should really work out how to pronounce that before I do these videos. This is a space opera where humanity is waging a never-ending war against an alien race called the Strits, and there are merchants who are stuck in the middle who are just trying to make a living, and pirates who exploit the war for their own gain. And this follows a boy named Joss, who lives on a merchant trader, and his family and all of his crew are slaughtered by pirates, and the children are taken and sold into slavery, but the captain of the pirates decides he wants to keep Joss for himself. So yeah, this is a very dark book, but it was so great. From the title and the cover, I imagine you would probably assume that this is more of a war story, but first and foremost, this is a story about abuse and recovering from abuse, and it does it fantastically well. The characters and the character development are also incredible. The writing style is just amazing. The action scenes are so frantic and confusing that they actually feel like you're in the middle of a war zone, and the space battles are incredibly cinematic. The world building for the Strits is also impeccable, and their culture is so fascinating. But I will say that their language isn't handled as well. It's not that the language is bad, it's that you're only told what the alien words and phrases mean once, and then you're never told what they mean again, and you're just expected to remember them, and I didn't, personally. But the evolution of language in English is also really interestingly handled, and so is the world building for humanity in general, actually. It's all just so incredible, and if you haven't picked this book up, I highly recommend it. And these last three are basically tied for my favourite books of the year. I couldn't choose between them. And the first of those is Reverie by Ryan LaSala. And this is a YA urban fantasy about a boy called Kane who wakes up in a hospital bed with no memories. And he is told by the police that he set fire to a historical landmark and crashed his dad's car into a river. And now under investigation for arson and vandalism, he has to find out what really happened and clear his name. And along the way he gets involved in the conspiracy involving some of his classmates, and stumbles into a surreal, nightmarish dreamscape. I went into this book expecting something utterly different to what I actually got. I expected fun, I expected cuteness, I expected comedy. This is dark. This is so dark. This book is an examination of what it means to be queer and what the place of queer people is in the modern day. And for most of this book, the conclusions that it comes to are really bleak. But the ending is like very hopeful and empowering. So it's not all doom and gloom, but the journey to get there is just wow. And it's also this incredible portrayal of the secrets we keep from ourselves, and how the person we present to the outside world is different to who we truly are inside, and it's just so great. And just about everything in this book ties into the themes. The magic system is heartbreaking, and the characters are all great. Kane constantly makes bad decisions, but the reader always understands why, and he never becomes like a truly unlikable character. But yeah, again, his struggles with his amnesia are also heartbreaking, and the way this book handles his sexuality is crushingly relatable in some aspects. The romance shouldn't work, but it does, and it's adorable, but also tragic in a lot of aspects, and the writing is beautiful. And so this is just all around an incredible book, and it's definitely one of my favourite books of all time. Next is The Tarot Sequence by K.D. Edwards. And I read both of these books last year, as well as the novellas, so that's why they're on the list together. And this is an adult urban fantasy set in the city of New Atlantis, which is ruled over by the Arcana, who are creatures of immense magical power who humanity subconsciously named the major arcana of tarot after. And this follows a man called Rune St. John, who is the last remaining heir to the Sun Throne, whose entire family was slaughtered when he was 15. And Rune now works as a mercenary, doing jobs for other arcana, and he is hired to investigate the disappearance of another arcana heir called Adam St. Nicholas, who is the son of Lady Justice, and at the same time he gets tricked into taking another Arcana heir as a ward until he turns 21. This series is very dark, so please do check the content warnings that I'm going to put in the description, but overall this is an incredibly adorable and wholesome story about found family and recovering from trauma, and it is the most adorable found family you will ever read about. All of the characters are incredible, especially Rune himself. The first book has a lot of problems. It has a repetitive structure, it has a lack of compelling female characters, and it has a really weak villain. The second book, The Hanged Man, immediately fixes all of these problems. The world building is incredible and incredibly interesting. The magic system is great. The development to how the characters use the magic is great. The action is intense. The plots are really twisty and unpredictable. There are some really intriguing mysteries which have been set up so far, and I can't wait to see where they go. And it's just an all-around incredible series. And if you want a great found family, I cannot recommend it highly enough. And last but by no means least, I have the Diviners series by Libba Bray, or rather the last 3 books in the Diviners series, because I read the first one in 2090. And the Diviners series is an urban fantasy / supernatural horror set in 1920s America, and the first book follows Evie O'Neill, who is sent to stay with her uncle in New York after a scandal in her home state of Ohio. And in New York, a serial killer is just beginning his work, and Evie has a strange power that may be the key to stopping him. But over time, this series becomes very much an ensemble cast, and I wouldn't call Evie the main character, because each of the books has a different main character, but all of them have POV in at least these 3 books, but not in the first one. I'm only gonna hold up one of these because this is straining my arms, so... So this series is just stunning. It's all about the systemic injustices of society, and it deals with themes of classism and sexism and racism and homophobia and eugenics and government corruption and all sorts of things. And in terms of theming, it's one of the most sophisticated series I've ever read. No, it's probably the most sophisticated series I've ever read. And to tie into the theming, most of the main cast have marginalized identities. So there are black protagonists and Jewish protagonists, and there's a gay protagonist and a disabled Chinese gay asexual protagonist. One of the protagonists is a girl who was in an abusive marriage. One of the protagonists is a socialist. So it all ties back into the theming. The characters are all incredible, especially Ling and Henry. They're my favourites. The romances are cute. The plot is extremely interesting and unpredictable. The world building is incredible. The villains are terrifying and hateful, and the writing itself is just beautiful. I know there's no such thing as objectivity in fiction, but I would call this objectively superior to most things I've read, and I highly recommend it to anyone regardless of their tastes. So yeah, those were all of my favourite books of 2020. I'm not going to hold up a stack of them because that would be way too heavy, and I've already put some of them back on the shelves anyway. Have you read any of these books? Do you agree? Do you disagree? Please leave your thoughts in the comments below. And also tell me what your favourite books of 2020 were, because I'm always looking for new stuff to read. If you liked this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and consider subscribing to my channel. You can follow me on Twitter or add me as a friend on Goodreads if you feel like it. Links to both of those in the description. And I will hopefully have another video up soon. It should hopefully be my tier list for every book I read in 2020. But until then, thank you for watching. I have been Isaac, and this has been Books with Ike. Goodbye.